Hello, my name's Tristan Hall. I'm the designer of the game 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, and I'm here to talk you through quickly an overview of how it plays. They're not really dice, they're counters. So this is 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, a two-player competitive card game that abstracts the events of 1066 to recreate and retell the Battle of Hastings. The title is derived from Elmer's or Aylmer's writings about Halley's Comet, which completed its perihelion passage in April of 1066. Many Anglo-Saxons saw it as an evil omen heralding the end of days, including Aylmer himself, and in a way he was right. King Edward the Confessor died in January of 1066 and left England in a right old state. Historians still can't agree on who he'd actually declared as successor, but there was a bunch of contenders. Harold Godwinson himself, whilst in Normandy, confirmed Edward's promise of the throne to Duke William in 1064, but later he said the promise was made under duress and that Edward had in fact promised Harold himself the throne on his deathbed. This is a claim William strongly disputed. Actually, Edgar Atheling, heir of Edward the Exile, had the best claim to the throne, but he was a teenager with no powerful military backing at the time. So when Edward died, Harold Godwinson seized the opportunity and had himself crowned King of England. And this is a move which triggered Duke William to amass his forces and set sail for England to invade. And he went off and gathered papal support before he set off, which basically turned the war into a papal-backed crusade. So the Normans viewed the passing of Halley's Comet as a good omen, a blessing, sort of William's invasion of England. So once he got wind of Duke William setting sail to conquer England, Harold assembled his men in the south and prepared for the Norman invasion, but other events were already transpiring and working against him. Harold's treacherous brother Tostig had sought counsel with the last great Viking, King Harald Hardrada of Norway. Tostig convinced Hardrada to muster his forces and invade England to take the throne for himself. So Hardrada set sail and attacked England in the north. Harold's earls, Edwin and Morcar, were tasked with England's defence in the north, but Hardrada and Tostig prevailed and the earls were defeated. This drove the new English King Harold himself to do something desperate and incredible. So with no choice left to him, King Harold uprooted his troops, who were all prepped and ready for William's invasion in the south, and then marched his army from London all the way up to Yorkshire, which is about 185 miles, in just 4 days, which is a military record for manoeuvring foot soldiers, which remains unbroken nearly 1,000 years later. Despite their exhaustion, King Harold's forces took the Norwegian Vikings by surprise at a place called Stamford Bridge, where Harold was able to soundly defeat Hardrada, and this actually ended for good the Viking Age pretty much there and then. But as Harold's battered troops tried to recover, Duke William landed his own invasion force on the south coast of England. So the beleaguered King Harold turned his attention to William and rallied his army again, this time to travel south and meet William at Hastings, and this is where the game takes place. The game of 1066, like the battle itself, is fought over 3 wedges of troops. The first player to destroy 2 wedges of troops at the Battle of Hastings wins the game. A player immediately loses the game if he's got no cards left in his deck at the start of a round, so if he goes to draw some and there's zilch left, he's out. Or if a player's leader, Harold for the Saxons or William for the Normans, if the leader gets destroyed, they're out of the game as well. Each player's got his own set of objectives that he's got to race through and defeat these objectives. So he's got to race through these objectives to get to the Battle of Hastings, and that's where the actual battle kicks off. So players will be spending the game preparing their forces and gathering allies and soldiers to take into the battle with them. So once a player gets to the Battle of Hastings objective, they can start doing damage to these wedges, and once they've done 10 damage to a wedge, they get to claim it for their side, and if you defeat 2 wedges, you win. So each player's got their own card deck, which represents their forces, their army, and tactics of the army. There are units. You can see in the bottom right corner there it says unit, and these are like the mainstay of each player's army, and you can see a little symbol here. This axe tells you that that's a infantry unit. There's also cavalry and archers, and these make up the bulk of each side's army, and you'll be using these to batter each other and deal damage to the wedges at Hastings. There are also characters who represent individuals that were present at the battle, sort of commanders of the army. And each player's leader is a character, but also has the special leader denomination, the crown, to show he's the leader, or at least wants the crown of England. There are events. These are one-shot cards. We've got the event time symbol, so basically they're used and then discarded. They just come in, do the job, and then get chucked in a player's discard pile. There are tactics, which represent battle capabilities, and these are just placed into a player's reserve area, so alongside the actual battlefield. They don't count towards a wedge per se, and a player can have 3 of these in total in play at a time. And lastly, there are attachments, which are attached to other cards. In this case, this one's attached to a unit to give it a little boost of zeal there. So what you do is slide the attachment card underneath whichever card it's attached to, and that shows you its a little bonus there. So let's have a look at one of the cards and just break it down. The artwork, first of all. Obviously I don't own any of the art, it's all placeholder stuff, basically just for me and the playtesters to enjoy and give an idea of what the artist might use in the final version. But if you look at the name in the middle of the card, this guy, for example, is called Agincourt, Sheriff of London, and he's got the key attributes of Saxon and Sheriff, so there may or may not be other cards that interact with those keywords. The type of card, character, over on the right here, shows you the rules associated with that type of card. The cost at the top left on the wax seal there, it says 2. That's how many resources it costs to play the card. A cost of 2 means you discard 2 cards to play it. Then on the top left, next to the cross, we see it's 0. That's the character's zeal, which represents their sort of willpower. Then we've got the axe, which represents the card's might, and the heart, which represents its health. So the health is how much damage it can take before it's destroyed. And this one also has the special ability, when played, draw a card, so it's learned. So all that means is simply when it comes into play, you get to draw an extra card from your deck. A little bonus there. Here's another example of a card that has the resources symbol up in the top right. So what that means is whilst the card's in play, instead of discarding a card to pay for another card's cost, you'd simply tire this card, which means rotate it 90 degrees, and that would count as discarding 1 card because it has 1 resource there. And then every card has, if I could fit it on, a little bit of flavour text here explaining the context of the card, who it is, what type of unit it is, whether or not it was present at the battle, because there's a couple of artistic or poetic licenses taken with a couple of the cards based on rumours and legends rather than actual events that may or may not have occurred. So when setting up the game, the Norman player takes the first player marker, and we're going to use the setup summary card to represent that, so he's going to be going first. You place the 3 wedges in the middle of the table, which the battle is going to be fought over. Each player places their leader. The Normans play first, so they can put him in any of these 3 wedges, and then the Saxons put their leader down. Then each player sorts their objective deck out in alphabetical order, A on top, starting with Halley's Comet, right through to G at the bottom, the Battle of Hastings itself. Then each player shuffles the deck and draws 6 cards to start. 1066 is played over a number of rounds. Each round has 4 phases: preparation, deployment, objective, and wedge. Preparation phase has 3 steps. Step 1 is victory check. If neither player has any cards left in their card deck, the game immediately ends in a tie. And if one player has no cards left in his card deck, he immediately loses the game. Step 2 of the preparation phase is to draw cards. So each player has to discard down to 6 cards if able, and then they draw 2 cards. Step 3 is ready all cards in play. Cards enter play upright, vertical, and can be tired for certain effects. And if a card's tired, it doesn't contribute any stats or bonuses to a battle. So once it's readied, it's ready to go again, back in the action. Phase 2 is the deployment phase. So starting with the first player, in this case the Normans, players alternate taking deployment turns, and on a turn a player can choose from one of the following. You can play a card from hand and bring it into the battle. Execute an action, which usually means tiring a card for its ability. Sacrificing a card. So if you had a card in one of the rows and you wanted to sacrifice it to bring in another card to take its place, you'd simply take the action of sacrificing it, which just chucks it into your discard pile. Or passing, and the first player to pass in a phase immediately just takes the first player marker, so they're going to go first in the next round. To play a card, you pay its resource cost in resources by either discarding that many cards or generating that many resources. So if we discarded 4 cards, we can bring this guy into play. So if I chucked 4 in the discard pile there, that would give us Edwin, Earl of Mercia. So he's a character. So characters and units come into play on your side of the battlefield in a wedge of your choice. So you could choose 1, 2 or 3, and it always goes into the top spot. So if the wedge is empty, it will just go here in row 1. So each battlefield, each player's side has 3 rows, 1, 2, 3. And when you play cards into the game, they fill straight up to the top row if possible. If I was to play him into the middle wedge, he couldn't go in the top row because that spot's already taken by Harold here, so he'd go in row number 2. And then if I was to bring in a third character in that row, or unit, it would go in row 3, and there are no more rows after this. So each side is limited to 9 cards, 3 in each wedge. Tactics are special cards which don't take up a row or wedge. These are played alongside the battlefield. So this one, for example, the English Thanes, these guys generate resources for the Saxon player. And this is a tactic, so it would cost 1 to bring it in. Here, can you see that? And it generate 1 resources if you tire it. And because it's a tactic card, it gets played alongside the battlefield there, so it's not taking up a space. And if I wanted to tire that to generate a resource, I can just turn it sideways. And attachment cards are attached to other cards. So this one, called Beck Hill, is attached to wedge 1, and it gives that wedge might +2. So we simply slide it under that wedge to show that the Saxon player now has an extra 2 might on that side, on that wedge. To execute an action, the player resolves an action ability on a ready card that he controls. So he tires the card and then resolves the action. So for example, Harold has the action ability Commander, move a Saxon unit or character to a different wedge. And he also has the ability, it's not really an ability, it's more of a hindrance, but Leader. If this card is destroyed, the Saxon player loses the game. Okay, so William has the exact same attribute there. So let's look at this action, Commander. So move 1 Saxon unit or character to a different wedge. Well, a Leader counts as a character, so we could use his action ability. So if he's taking a lot of damage in this wedge for one reason or another, we tire the card to use the action, move a unit or character, in this case a character, to a different wedge. We'll just slide him over here, and now he's tired, so he won't be able to contribute towards any battle or any goings on in that wedge. But at the start of the next round, he'll ready, and he'll be good to go again. And since William has the exact same abilities, he could do the same if he wanted. So on his turn, he could tire and jump over to here and chase Harold round a battlefield. To sacrifice a card, a player chooses a non-leader card he controls on his side of the battlefield and removes it from play. So for example, if I had these axemen in on the Saxon side, and let's say I had Edwin here in the last spot, and I want to get rid of those axemen and bring in Leofwin, big dude, loads of might, loads of health, way stronger than those axemen. So my action in a turn would be to sacrifice a card. So I'd simply sacrifice these guys, chuck them in the discard pile, As soon as there's a gap in any row, all the cards behind it fill that gap. So in this case, Edwin is going to move up to row 2, which clears the way for me to bring in Leofwin into row 3 there, and now that is an incredibly difficult wedge to beat for the Normans. Objective phase. So starting with the first player, each player makes an attempt to destroy the topmost objective of his objective deck, usually using a might or zeal battle. So we have, if you remember, zeal here and might here. So for an objective battle, the player sums up the total battle value of all cards on his side of the battlefield that have that attribute. So a zeal battle in this case, well, if we just use Harold for now, he's got 3 zeal and 3 might, which makes it easier to calculate. So let's look at the objectives here. The first one is a battle objective, Halley's Comet. This is actually a free objective though. If you look at the text there, this objective is destroyed automatically. When destroyed, move on to the Battle of Fulford. So at the first round of a game, each player has the Halley's Comet objective and will defeat it automatically. So they defeat it and move on to the next one. So let's say Harold now is at the Battle of Fulford, and this is an objective battle using might. This has 2 might and 6 health, and it's got a when destroyed ability there, which we won't talk about yet. So the Saxon player will add up the might of all of his cards in this side. So let's say if it's just Harold here, he's got 3 might. He's fighting against an objective of 2 might. So you simply take the difference. 3 minus 2 is 1, so we do 1 damage to this objective. And just place a damage token on it like that. It's got 6 health. So once we get to 6 health, we'll clear that objective and move on to the next one. And this says here, when destroyed, you must destroy one of your units or characters if possible, then move on to Battle of Stamford Bridge. So hopefully by this point you'd have lots of units and characters in play, and you could choose one of those to discard to get to the next objective. And you just move on to the Battle of Stamford Bridge. And you just keep going like that through all the objectives. And they all have their own little special abilities. And once you've got through them all, you end up at the Battle of Hastings, and that's when you can start dealing damage to the wedges. Next comes the wedge phase. This only happens if one of the players is at the Battle of Hastings. So let's say we've reached Hastings. The Saxons have managed to bring Leofwin into play. Step 1 is might combat. So each player sums up the total battle value of all the ready units he controls at that wedge. So here we've got Leofwin with a might of 4 and Harold with a might of 3. So we've got 7 total might for the Saxons and 3 for William. So it's a difference of 4. The Saxons inflict 4 damage onto the second wedge. And if they get to 10 damage, they defeat that wedge. We then have Zeal Combat, where the characters compare the total zeal on each side. So here we've got 1 zeal for Leofwin and 3 for Harold, so they've got 4 total. William's only got 3. So the Saxons win the zeal battle. Zeal's a little bit different. It's like a special bonus damage, and it represents the morale of that side of the battlefield. So if you win a zeal battle, you don't count the difference, you simply do 1 point of damage. If both sides are equal in a might or zeal battle, both sides inflict just 1 point of damage. If one player is at Hastings and the other hasn't defeated other objectives yet, so they haven't actually arrived at Hastings, zeal battles still take place every round, but might battles don't. And only the player who is at Hastings can inflict that extra 1 point of damage to the wedge if he has higher zeal. So if you get to a wedge first, it gives you the advantage to start doing damage to that wedge, which gives the other player impetus to try and catch up quickly and get to Hastings and join in the battle. Once a player does 10 points of damage to a wedge, they claim it. So say the Saxons have won that one, they claim it, and then battle would continue over the final 2 wedges, and if the Saxons claim another, they would win the game. The first person to get to 2 wedges wins the game. That was my quick overview of 1066 Tears to Many Mothers. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the game and you get a chance to play it. If you do, please comment on the forums, on Board Game Geek or on my blog, and let me know what you think. Thanks for playing, thanks for watching. Take care. Okay, so here's a quick example of what it might look like once both sides get to Hastings and start kicking ass. Yeah.